raise her hand. She's like, I know it's me. I'm just surprised you figured it out, right? Sounds like something Maddie would say. How many of you are favorite kid? These are kind of some funny little favorites. I especially, wasn't this funny? You got to leave this one up here. I saw this yesterday. Keep smiling. You may be the favorite child now, but someday Mom will live in your basement. You'll realize why I never fought you for that role. So Sydney, it's okay. Someday Mom will live with Maddie. So that's what my brothers keep saying. Yeah, you're the favorite. They're going to be living with you. So, but I love my mom. She can. My dad, he scares me. But I'd be happy. Mark and I have always, as soon as Mark and I got together, we established early on which parent could live with us. My mom and his father. not his mom and not my dad. So best of luck to you guys. But yeah, I love the dad one. Or this one I thought for Jamie. Do I have a favorite child? Of course it is. It's whichever one's listening at the time. And some of you are never the favorite child, right? Let's see, go to the next one, yeah. This is what Mark would totally say to our kids. Try and wish you happy Father's Day, but your phone's off. Unhappy Father's Day. Oh, you remember? Yes, I may be your least fave, but I have the best memory. And he says, I don't have a favorite child. I dislike every one of you equally, each in their own special way. Can I get an amen, Jamie? You know that Dad would totally say that. No, I don't like all of you the same. There's no specials there.
You're all terrible. You're all terrible.
Terrible. If only you guys were like us, because we were great kids, weren't we? All of us adults tell ourselves that. But for sure, that favorite child. But in all seriousness, as you grow up, did some of you kind of knew you were I knew I was my dad's favorite, which was funny because he hasn't talked to me in 27 years, so that was it. I got 26 or whatever, he stopped talking to me on my wedding day, and I was 23. So for 23 years, I was my dad's favorite. Then that was it. I'm done. I'm not his favorite anymore. But growing up, I totally was my dad's favorite. Lonnie was my mom's favorite. But do you kind of know if you were the favorite child? Oh, Kristen's got it right there. Oh, Abby, that's depressing. Some of you can say because your sibling's not here. Some of you just shot your hand and was like, oh, sorry. Yeah, to your sibling. Jamie and Kayla and Alyssa, who's my favorite? Kayla said, I'm my favorite.
I think Alyssa is for sure Dad's favorite.
Alyssa's Dad's favorite.
Okay, this is good.
Your
It's
favorite.
family
I'm
therapy.
the middle child.
Well, sorry, say that again?
I said Alyssa's Dad's favorite, Jamie's mom's favorite, and I'm the middle child.
And there's therapy for middle children.
Yeah. And I have this lovely woman.
Come on, where's our middle children? We should have a Bible study just for you middle children. Right?
No, I think me and my mom have a special connection.
Yeah, we
I
do.
would say
We have a special, I have a special with each one, yeah. Alyssa, who talks to me incessantly 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day. And so she just talks to me a lot. But yeah, you kind of know if you're the favorite. It was interesting. Mary, Ramika, and I, we get to do a Bible study every week. And so Friday, we were doing our Bible study, and we're studying James, which is a great book to study. Everybody says it is until I teach it, and then they're like, oh, that's the hardest book ever. But it is a great book when you really understand the context and what it is. But in the book of James, the text we were on Friday was talking about favoritism in the church, and how God does not allow favoritism. That favoritism is unacceptable in God's eyes, especially. Now, of course, James was talking to the church, and he's talking about favoritism in the church. And there's different reasons for favoritisms, and we kind of studied that. But one of the things that we talked about is God having favorites. And so, have you ever wondered if God has favorites? And the reality is, this may seem like a contradiction, but actually God does have a favorite. God, He does have favorites. And some of you are going, well, you officially have my attention. Good. Some of you are very expressive on your face. What? He does have favorites. We all have preferences, and I can tell you that God absolutely has favorites. And if you are someone who has gotten to know the heart of God, which is what we're talking about, Just want to know the heart of God. You know, some of you, when you really know somebody, you know what they love. You know what lights them up, you know what they like doing, spending time with. I can ask your kids, like, oh, if your mom had one evening to do whatever, what would she do? Or dad, or what is our favorite, you know. We know what our favorites are because it's kind of what we're, it's just what we're all about, you know. Some of us like to say, I'm totally all about Jesus. And it's like, have you looked at your Facebook page? Have you looked at your, at your agenda? Have you looked at your calendar? Have you looked at how you spend your money? Could I ask your spouse and would they say the same thing? Could I ask your kids and would, you know, but the reality is, we do have preferences. We have things that just kind of light us up. And for God, God absolutely has favorites and preferences. And believe it or not, when you read His Word and the more you get to know God, you find out what His preferences are, what His favorite is. And I'm just going to read through, what I'm going to have Jamie do is just put some scriptures up. And I've tried to underline as best that I can. What is His favorite? One of His favorite is the brokenhearted. He absolutely is totally about the brokenhearted. Those that are crushed in spirit. Those that are lost and don't even know they're lost. Those that are lost and know they're lost. The sheep, the coin, the two sons, both sons were totally lost, and the father went to both of them. The sinners. The Message reads that last text, Matthew 11:28, actually says it this way: I'm here to invite outsiders, not coddle insiders. You know, everybody thinks God is crazy in love with the church. He is, as He defines church, not as we have made it. Because the thing that we made it, you'll see what He thinks about that. He went and started just flipping some tables up and doing a whole lot of things when the people made it something other than what it was supposed to be. Yeah, you're right. He's absolutely crazy about the church. Because the church is the embodiment of who He is. But I said a couple weeks ago, maybe more than a couple weeks ago, but ultimately there's a phrase, find where God is moving and join Him there. I can't tell you, I'm just going to be transparent and a little venti here. It grieves me how few people are willing to go to Golden Living Center with Mary and I. That's okay. It's not about, again, I don't want it to be, it's just that there's so many, I just see so many people that are just experiencing Jesus through some of the things that, and there's people that are coming, it's not just Mary that's coming, but it's important that we find, and God isn't just moving at Golden Living, we have a team of people here that are, God is moving in our children's, God is moving in our youth, and there's just so many people that come here to love on our kids, to help provide food for our teens. They're seeing where God is at and they're joining Him. So it's not like you only have to go to Golden Living. That's not my point. But we need to find where God is moving and join Him there. And the reality is what moves God? The brokenhearted, the fatherless, the widows, the prisoners, the oppressed, the poor, the foreigners, the neglected, the forgotten. You know, that word neglected has really kind of struck me. Mark made a statement. It's when I first started doing the Golden Living, and I was telling him about how people kind of are responding to this over there. And one of the things that I've experienced with these people over at Golden Living, they're not all 1 foot in the grave, by the way. You know, some people are just rehabbing there. And one of the things is, especially as it relates to the church, there's a lot of churches who said they'll come and they don't show up. And so they get excited, they come into the room hoping someone's going to be there and nobody's there. And so many people are so busy with their life, they don't get a lot of visitors. Their own families. You know, there's a lady in there my age, she has 3 sons and none of them visit her. And she's not, you know, I think she's rehabbing there, although according to her, that is her home now. So I don't necessarily know what that means. But anyways, when I was talking to Mark about it, I said, man, And I was just talking about how my heart went out to these people. And I don't remember how I said it, but Mark said, the neglected. And that's just, that phrase, has just struck me. I think God breaks his heart when he sees people neglected, when he sees people forgotten. Some of you go, well, I'm not fatherless, I'm not a widow, I'm not a prisoner. I want you to hear the language that God uses with this. The prisoner, those who don't deserve our attention. All right, a foreigner, very simply, you know what a foreigner is? A foreigner is someone who does not belong. Don't believe me? Go find an immigrant. Find an illegal immigrant and ask them if they feel like they belong. A foreigner is someone who doesn't feel like they belong. God is passionate. And don't take God and bring him into the political arena. That's not what this is about. But God is passionate about those who have been forgotten, who have been rejected. And some of you say, well, they deserve it. Well, so, you deserve it. You just haven't got caught. Widows are women, especially a widow back in Bible times. That was a devastating blow to be a widow for obvious reasons. But the other reason you have to understand is that a widow had no identity apart from a husband. The husband gave her identity. And so when her identity dies, she's kind of a woman without it. She's a person without an identity. Some of us are, what is an orphan? Right? A person who doesn't have a father, who doesn't belong. Listen to all this language about not belonging. An orphan doesn't belong to a family. A widow no longer belongs to her husband. Do you know what the church is called and what Jesus is called? Does anybody know? What is the church referred to in the Bible? What is it? Another language, what does it use in this covenant language as it relates to a marriage? Do you know what we're called? We are called the bride. Who is our groom? Jesus. Okay. Spiritually speaking, we all at some point are a widow. We don't belong to Christ until we do. Spiritually speaking, many of us are orphaned until we allow ourselves to be adopted into God's family. The fatherless, come on. When you pray, what do you say? Dear Heavenly Father. Right? So, man, what moves God is the neglected, the forgotten, those that don't belong. So some of these other verses, I don't know if Jamie's already had them up, but the Psalm 68 and Deuteronomy, and again, I've underlined those. Fatherless, the lonely. Do you hear that language? He sets the lonely in families. Look at where is God's holy dwelling, right? Is God a father to the fatherless, a defender of the widows. This is just beautiful language. He leads out the prisoners. He's passionate about the prisoners, the fatherless, the widow, the foreigner. Right? If you go to the next one, we see that he, again, those same languages. He sets the prisoners free. Right? He gives sight to the blind. He's watching over the foreigner, the one that doesn't belong. He sustains the fatherless and the widow. Right? Frustrates the wicked. Isaiah even goes on to talk. This is quoted by Jesus in the New Testament in Luke. He says, this has now been fulfilled in your hearing. He says, I'm here to do this. I'm here to fulfill this Isaiah 61. Right? Jesus came for what? Who? To bind the brokenhearted. To bring freedom to those of us that are still in captivity. And some of you, captivity to what? Some of you are still slave to your mind, to your thinking, to your sin. To doing life on your own terms the way you want to do it. You are totally enslaved to that. And he wants to set us free from that. He's there to comfort those who mourn, those who grieve. And instead he wants to put a crown, right? Oil instead of mourning. Are you seeing a pattern here? Jesus was continually seeking the neglected, the poor, the unaccepted, the lost. This morning this came to me as I was thinking about my sermon and we were in worship, and I thought of this favorite. And I said my mom's favorite was Lonnie. Lonnie and I both are middle. It's Frank, and then it's Lonnie, and then it's me, and then it's Rich. And so there's 4 of us. And so Lonnie, I bet you if I called all my brothers right now and said, who was the favorite moms? And they'd probably all, even Lonnie would say it was him. And do you know why Lonnie was my mom's favorite? It's because my dad hated him. I didn't realize it until I was sitting right there 5 minutes ago. I know why. I know why he was her favorite. Because my father hates him. And I know my father hated him. My father was so hard on Lonnie. He was different than any of us. In fact, the things that my dad did not like about my mom, Lonnie had in spades. And so I realize as I'm sitting here, my mom was compensating for my brother who knew he was not loved by my father. Are you seeing God's heart? Right? Do you see God's heart? Do you break when you see somebody who is left out, neglected, broken? Yes, even those close to you. Jesus continually sought out the neglected, the poor, the unaccepted, the lost. He always did. Don't believe me? Pick up the book and read. Pick it up and find out who he is. Stop defining God by the church. I wish I could say, look at the church and see God, but we are living in a sad day because the church is not reflecting the God of the Bible I read. It's not. It's a country club for people who already get it. And that is not what God created the church to be. But to be Him. To be Him in the world. Throughout God's Word, we see Him say, I mean, honestly, you guys, I had to sit there. It took me hours to only pick 4 verses. That's how many verses are in the Bible about what I just read. The fatherless, the neglected. Throughout His Word, we hear language like this. Do not oppress the fatherless, the widow, the orphan, the foreigner. Do not. He also says to defend. The 2 languages that He uses. Do not oppress them, but defend them. Because be careful, doing nothing is not something that I suggest. Doing nothing is not something that I suggest. In fact, when back on Deuteronomy 10:18, it says that He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow. I don't know if you can back up to that verse, Jamie. I know I'm throwing you a curveball. Let's go backwards a little bit. Right there. Deuteronomy 10:18. He defends the cause of the fatherless and the widow and loves the foreigner. What does it say after that? Read that for me. Residing among you. When I was reading that, you know what came to my mind was a story in the New Testament, in the Gospels, where Jesus talks about the rich man and Lazarus. Lazarus was a poor man who was filled with sores all over his body. And he was poor, destitute, and he was just outside the rich man's house. And as the story goes, Jesus says it's like this rich man and Lazarus. Lazarus was a poor beggar. And really, do you know who tended to the sores of Lazarus on his body? The dogs. Stray dogs tended to Lazarus' sores. And Jesus says in that story, there's language that says Lazarus longed to eat the food that fell from the rich man's table, essentially. So probably outside the gate. And so then the time came when the beggar died and the angels carried him off to be with Abraham in heaven. And then the rich man died also and was buried. And in hell, where he was in torment, right, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. He called him and said, Father Abraham, have pity on me. Father Abraham denotes that this man was a Christian. Yes, there will be Christians that go to hell. Brace yourself. Because there's people that think they're Christian because they go to church, or because they follow rules, or because they give money in the offering, or because they do these things. That doesn't make you a Christian. Do Christians do those things? Absolutely. So don't think you got a free pass there. Oh, we're doing good. I don't have to do all that. No, Christians do that. It's just the reason why you're doing it. So Lazarus was a Jewish man. Otherwise, we would not have called him Father Abraham. So we know that he was a Jewish man. And the other thing that's interesting is he said, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool the tip of my tongue because I'm in agony in this fire. And it just struck me when I was reading this that he knew Lazarus' name. Instead of, could you send that poor guy that made it up there? But he knew his name. The rich man knew Lazarus, yet did nothing. The rich man didn't go to hell because he was rich. That has no bearing on it. The money in the rich man's life was he didn't need God because he had money. And God said, okay, one of these days you'll figure out where that money came from. But I understand you don't need me because you got that beautiful green thing called money. It's going to do everything for you. So the rich man didn't, but he didn't go to hell because he had lots of money. He went to hell because he did not have the heart of God. He didn't have a relationship with God. If you have a relationship with God, if you're sitting here this morning, you go, I have a relationship with God, then you'll have the heart of God. Then you will want the heart of God. You will seek the heart of God. He knew Lazarus by name, yet did nothing. Yet also God gave him the means to help Lazarus. Let me go back to rich man. Where did you think you got the money? Yeah, from me. And I gave it to you to help a man who, yeah, kudos to you, you found out his name, but you didn't do anything about his situation. I didn't give you that money so you could have more cars, more houses, more friends, more popularity, feel good about yourself, making sure you're secure and safe and happy. I didn't give you that money for that. I gave you to be a blessing. And I even put somebody right in front of you. And you did nothing about it. So when I was reading that, the foreigner residing among you. It's easy to think of foreigners, I was telling somebody this week, it's like saying, I love my brothers and sisters in Africa. Yeah, because I don't see them. I love a lot of people that I don't see. It's easy. I don't got to do anything for them. Right? But there's foreigners, you guys. Right now, I want you all to think about who is the foreigner residing among you. For some of you, it's someone in your house that doesn't feel like they belong. And I'm not talking about necessarily to you. It's a coworker. Or, crazy idea, this church. I can't be the only person that notices that a year ago, we probably had about 60, 70 people in here. Let's be honest, do we really care where everybody else is? We should. We should. But you know what? If you think that it's enough to just wonder about it, okay. Let me know how that goes. And say hello to the rich man. Who is God's favorite? If you haven't figured it out by now, it's the neglected, the forgotten, it is the broken, it is the fatherless, the widow, the foreigner, those that don't belong, the orphan. I could go on. Who is God's favorite? Sinners. And are you ready for this? That's all of us. For all have sinned. Do you want to know why it's hard for you to not recognize the foreigner among you? Is because you do not realize that you are a foreigner. God told them that in the Old Testament. You need to look after the foreigners because you once were foreigners in a land that was not yours. And I came and rescued you from a land that was not yours. And I put you into a land that you did not build or create or do anything. I did that. You were a foreigner. So now tend to the foreigner among you. We are all sinners. We're all fatherless. We're all the widows, the orphans, and the foreigners. The reality is some of us just don't know it yet. Some of you go, I know I have hard times. I'm not talking about that whole, I get it, nobody's perfect. Stop saying that. Because that becomes a substitute to confront the sinner we really are. And really, let me help you understand what a sinner is. A sinner, stop thinking about bad things. A sinner, very simply, is somebody who lives their life separated from God. That's a sinner. See, we think of a sinner as someone, well, I mean, I'm trying, I don't do that many bad things. That's the world's definition of a sinner. A sinner in the Bible is for we have all sinned and fall short of God's glory, meaning we do not measure up. None of us on our own merit can make ourselves right with God. There isn't enough good things in this world for you to do. The Bible says that your best religious behavior is still filthy rags to God. The only thing that matters is the blood of Jesus Christ that sets you right with God. And every single one of us in here need it. I don't care how good you think you are. We are all fatherless. We are all the widow. We are all the orphan and the foreigner. We didn't belong, yet a God with compassion and grace and abounding in love sent his Son to take our place so that we could be made right with God. Because we didn't belong. We did not belong. We are all sinners. Some of us just don't know it yet. That Revelations 3:20, and I think I have that text up there. This is when Jesus is talking to the church in Laodicea. And you know this verse, that you are neither hot nor cold. So I'm going to what? I'm going to vomit you out of my mouth. Which means I will naturally reject you. That's what that means. I'm not choosing to reject you. I will reject you. Because you are doing your own thing. You have your own God. It's called you, King Renee. It's not me. Right? And so naturally, so we all know that verse. But that verse comes from this text here where it says, you say I'm rich, I've acquired wealth, and do not need a thing. But Jesus says, but what does it say there? You do not realize that you are wretched, that you are poor, that you are blind, and that you are naked. And you don't see it. Who is God's favorite? You are. We all are God's favorite. You know that verse I put up there a little while back where it says, Jesus says, I did not come for the righteous but the sinners. You know that verse? Sometimes when we hear that, we think Jesus is saying is that some of us are righteous and some of us are sinners, right? I remember there was a lady, I won't say who it is, some of you might know, so I said this years ago, but this woman that I knew, doesn't live here, down in the LA area, very wealthy, has a beautiful home. My husband and I are at the house, and we're talking. She knows I'm, pastor, and she starts talking about churchy things, or as best as she can, but she knows very little. And so she says, don't get me wrong, I think like church and faith is really great for needy people. And I said, you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, in her mind, she goes, well, you're not needy. You're just trying to help those needy people. I'm trying to help one now before she ends up in hell. But before I can help her, she has to know she's needy. Her biggest problem isn't that she doesn't know God. Her biggest problem is she doesn't think she needs him. So I told her, yep. And I'm probably the neediest one out there. And she's like, well, I mean, I think it's good, because I think needy people need a place. Yep, and we found it. His name is Jesus. And I sure hope you find it before it's too late. Because once we truly embrace our brokenness, you will seek broken people. Once you realize that you are or were a sinner, you know, if we really believed this thing that we talk about on Sunday, this building would be filled with people. I wonder when the last time you invited anybody to a conversation. Good. Yeah. Invited anybody to church. Not the church is the answer, but maybe you don't invite anybody because you don't like it. And maybe you don't seek broken people because you don't really see yourself as broken. Maybe you're like this wealthy woman who happens to be related to me. And you just think it's good for needy people, and after all, you've got it okay. You're good. You don't need God. I mean, no, it's good for needy people. Once you realize and embrace your own sinfulness, and once you truly realize that apart from Christ, you will perish in the same torment that rich man. If you actually believed it, you would do something about it. And you would seek out other people who are. I pray for that woman. I want her desperately to know that her thinking is going to send her to hell. I want her to know because I believe hell is real. Do you? Yeah, and you know what? I know Ray thinks it's real. Do you know why? Because you couldn't walk down this street and pass her without her telling you about it. When you realize that you've been separated from God, and you realize that hell, in your mind, somebody somehow you came to realize that there is this thing called God, and there's this thing called heaven, and there's this thing called hell, and it is very much real. And it's not just a theory or a religion that helps us to control our behavior. That's a lie of the world defining Christianity. But once you realize it's real, you will do something about it. You've heard me say this before. There is an atheist, a very outspoken atheist, who says he has no respect for any Christian that says they believe what they say and does not tell people about it. An atheist says that. Somebody who doesn't believe in God. He says, I have no respect for you Christians who say you believe, because what he says is, according to what I understand you believe, you think that I'm in danger of going to hell, yet none of you tell me. I have no respect for that. And neither does God. Because the reality is, at some point, you guys, it's got to come down to belief. Do you actually believe this? If you believe it, you'll respond. And once you truly embrace your brokenness, you will seek the brokenhearted. Once we embrace our own orphanage, our own adoption, we will seek the orphan. When we embrace our own poverty. See, one of the dangers in Christianity, you guys, is some of us get saved by grace because we know we can't go to hell, so we accept that there's a God who died and went there for us, and then we start living our life on merit, which is on what we do. And then we look at other people and go, well, you should be better. I'm good. That's what we do. Oh, sure, fine, Jesus, go to hell for me. And so we look at people. Great story in the Gospels about that. You know, there's a parable that Jesus tells about a man who had an enormous debt and couldn't pay it. And so the king had pity on him Because you know what the man said? He goes, just give me more time because I can do it. I don't need any help. I can do it. I just need to get more money. I need more time. And the king had pity on him. He had pity on him. And you know why he felt sorry for him? Is because he looked at this man and he thought, oh my gosh, you actually think you can pay this. I feel sorry for you. So I'm going to release you of this debt. A debt you'll never pay. That man's problem wasn't his debt. His problem was he thought he could pay it. We can never pay it. And since you can never pay it, neither can that person that irritates you, makes you uncomfortable, that you don't want to contend with. The rich man that says, Lazarus, who knows what he did in his life to deserve this poverty, but I can't go saving every homeless person. Because he should be able to figure it out. I did. It's our thinking that's messed up. That man's problem is that he thought he could pay the debt. And if you don't believe me, the story goes on where he goes and finds somebody who owes him something. Somebody that's wronged him. The last time you got offended by somebody, when I get offended by somebody, when I get hurt by somebody, when somebody rejects me, when somebody does it, do you know what I think about? I think about how I did that to Jesus. I think about how he forgave me. I think about how he went to the cross for me. I think about how he endured ridicule and shame and abandonment from his own father for me. That's what I think about. This man received this enormous gift from a king and paid a debt that he believed he could pay. See, I think there's some of us sitting in here today that Jesus paid a debt that you still think you can pay. And as a result, you have a hard time looking at these needy people. When we embrace our poverty, we will seek the poor because we are them. We were them and we found out what is truly going to change their life. If you want to know that story and how it ends, find me afterwards. I'll tell you where it is in the Bible. The church is supposed to be the embodiment of a living, compassionate God. We are to be his heart in this world. I'm telling you, God's heart breaks because his body has become something else. It's become a place that's merely a bunch of human rules being taught by man. And Jesus tells, and God tells us through James, that religion that God our Father will accept as pure is to look after those that don't belong. And to keep yourself from being polluted by the world. Stop being conformed by the pattern of this world, but be renewed by your mind. I'm going to invite the team to come forward, and I want you to really spend some time this morning just in reflecting. Just really think about this favorite of God. We are all God's favorite. You know, God is passionate about the poor, the broken, and the neglected. I wonder, are you? Leave that question up there, Jane. I want everyone to look at that right now. And I'm asking you. I'm borderline commanding you, but I can't force you to do anything. I want you to answer that question in your head.
Oh,
I want you, I don't care if you're on the worship team, I don't care if you're on the back on the soundboard, I want you to look up there. And as you go into a time, as we go into a time of worship, and know this, talk is cheap. Talk is cheap. You can say all day long you feel bad for needy people. That woman in my life said that. She felt so bad for needy people. They're so needy, not like her. If that's how you see it, you've missed the message. I want you to spend some time this morning. If you don't believe that God's really passionate about this, his disciples asked him, when are we going to know when the end comes? And Jesus says, let me tell you what the end's going to be like. You're going to gather everybody together, And I'm going to say, okay, sheep on the right, goats on the left. And it's all going to come down to, what did you do? Not how you felt, but what did you do with the hungry, with the thirsty, with the undeserving, with the sick? You know, the ones that stink and make you uncomfortable? What'd you do with them? What did you do with those people that were residing among you? You know, there's going to be a lot of goats. They're going to say, what? I feel sorry for needy people. The father's going to say, oh, you poor little goat. Poor little goat. See, goat, the sheep on this side, they didn't just see needy people, they knew they were needy. And because they knew they were, they went to the needy people. They helped them. The sheep knew that they were lost without me. You really didn't need me. They did. And so for them, I had prepared an eternal dwelling. And for you, good luck with what you got. And I'm putting it a lot nicer than Jesus did. Believe it or not. Those of you that think I'm hard, read the Word. As you spend time this morning, ask that question. Do I have the heart of God? And I also feel prompted this morning to also just put it out here. There may be some of you in here, and it may blow my mind. You may have been in church your whole life. And you're like, I've never saw it that way. I'm needy. I'm the foreigner, living in my own home and in my own life. I need to allow God to change my life. I must accept the gift of Jesus Christ. I really need all of you listening. The invitation is there. The invitation is there. If you have not accepted Jesus Christ to pay a price that you will never be able to pay, I invite you this morning to receive that. You are a sinner just like the rest of us. Not that we're not all perfect, but that we all don't deserve it. And we all at one point didn't belong, and now we do. So I'm praying for that person this morning. And I invite you to come to an altar. I invite you to kneel and put your face before God. Do you know there's a reason why a lot of people don't come to church? Because they don't need it. I don't know about you. I've been a Christian for 23 years. There's not a day that goes by, let me tell you, listen very carefully, that I don't need God. There is not a day that I don't need the life-saving truth of Jesus Christ. And when you get to the place where you can go a few weeks without Him, you got a problem. So I invite you to respond. I invite you to pray. You can light candles for loved ones. Give of your offering. Put in the prayer box. Lord, help me. Pray for me. Maybe some of you want to just talk to me afterwards and say, I'd like to talk to you because I don't think I've ever really acknowledged my sinfulness, my brokenness, my orphanage. And I invite you to do that this morning. And then we'll meet around the communion table and invite you to remember what Jesus did. Let me pray for you. Father God,